Can you see? Right, good. Well, welcome everybody. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming this morning and taking your weekend. And I also want to thank organizers of the conference for inviting me over. We'll get started. My name is Alkin. I'm from Istanbul. I come from Turkey, and I'm a senior technical manager at Percona. And I run the global operations team for managed services. And we do manage databases specific to on MySQL area. And I do have 20 plus years of experience in IT, specifically on database domain. And I've been working on enterprise databases for many, many years. And since about 10 years ago, I switched over to open source databases and focused on MySQL. In my enterprise background, I go back in many, many years, and we'll talk about that a little bit to give you a perspective on how the open source evolved over the enterprise databases. I also speak in conferences. We have our own conference, Percona Live, both North America and Europe, and also some other conferences in Europe area. So about this presentation, I wanted to give you an overview of MySQL and history about it, where it comes from and how it evolved. And also I want to show you what we use on day-to-day basis for our customers. And there are also some new developments in the last 5 years in MySQL and open source space, and I do want to share some of those thoughts with you. So the inception of MySQL was started in 1995. That's actually the same year as I started my database career. And I did not start with MySQL, unfortunately. I started with Informix database, which was brought out by IBM in year 2000 or 2001. And it did not die, but it lost its market value after years. In 1995, Monty actually written MySQL, and it was developed in a special project, and then it evolved and it grew. And I'm not going to go into too many details, but then in 2005 and 2016, there were some other developments in the MySQL space, and until 2009, it grew, and the user base it grew, of course, with the social media, internet, it has become like very popular database in the world. In 2009, Oracle actually bought Sun Microsystems and became the original owner of MySQL. So from that time till today, there are other stakeholders, one of which is Monty again, and it forked. Didn't actually leave MySQL to Oracle, forked Oracle to MariaDB. And MariaDB is a very popular database right now. In 2008, Peter found Percona, and it forked MySQL from the Oracle Community Edition. And in 2008 and 2014, there was other Drizzle and WebScale was found for the things that the regular MySQL could not do. They actually had some development over it, so, but they also did not last long. As of today, the only original MySQL stays with Oracle, and Percona has its branch with the upstream Oracle code. And I'll show you how that goes in a minute. So the MySQL history, it started in early developments and became to be used in production in version 3. And it became very popular. Version 4 wasn't very popular release. And version 5, InnoDB became very popular with the row-level locking. And it brought in a lot of other features that the regular enterprise RDBMSs had, like triggers, functions, stored procedures. And some of them did work, some of them did not work in the end. Major release for MySQL was version 5, and it picked up from there. So from version 5 to 8 till today, these are the branches that was forked and developed. As of today, we're on version 8. in MySQL space. Less, the MariaDB version is on 10.3, which has its own versioning and releases. It steered away from the original code base, but it has a lot of features like the version 8 MySQL. They're still used in the same market space as open source databases. And I want to thank Daniel to keep this, maintain this page, because it's keep changing every year. So in MySQL version 5 to 5.7, there was a lot of developments, but there was not much feature rich. And on 5.7, which was like a really major version, could have been version 6, it came like with 150 new features. So if there are new features added to an open source database like this, that means that it didn't actually have all these goodies in the earlier releases that the market demanded. So with group replication, InnoDB, Optimizer, and many other developments, it actually picked up more popularity in the market. So this was a major release. On version 8, things changed a little bit. Everything that was added on 5.7 became much better, because like the GIS support, it did not have the world in that 3D shape that we wanted, and it didn't have some of these security features that was designed for enterprise customers or enterprise businesses, was not actually able to solve all the problems. So version 8 came with a bunch of new features, but also with a lot of improvements. Currently on the DBA side, where I'm from, is if you actually manage databases on a day-to-day basis, you would need a lot of these features, and you would actually have hassled and try to troubleshoot all these problems in production environments. So if you see something over here that is actually solving existing production problem, many of these features, especially in 2019, this year and the last 5 years, security is the major topic, and we hear, hacking and other news every day stolen from databases. So in order to improve those, we have to have some of these security features. So on the dev side, there is also a lot of tools and features added to version 8. And some of them was JSON support, which you already know. The key value store database is very popular, and it's being used in production environment. So MySQL 8 came with SQL, which is the RDBMS, and the NoSQL, which with the JSON support. Then what happened? The version 8 released, and it became GA. But it did not have everything in order, because it wasn't a rush, but there was a lot of features added. So active development has been put a lot of efforts to improve some of those. So within the version 8, the day that it has become GA, there were like several bugs already in it. So as soon as they've been reported, Oracle dev team started putting together a big effort to release, and they're not going to wait until a major release and keep adding those things. So I try to list and try to keep track of it, but it's changing almost every day right now. So we are on version 8.18 and 19, they're GA, but the beta releases are available and downloadable on Oracle's website. So in between, Oracle actually made such changes that can impact actually from one sub-release to the other sub-release. So when we call it a minor version upgrade, it should be seamless to fix a bug. But in this case, if you are actually upgrading from, let's say, 8.012, you're going to have problems if you don't take care of some of these deprecated features. So where does Percona Server stand? Of course, as I mentioned, Percona Server is a branch right now with upstream MySQL 8 from Oracle, and it's actually continued development. It comes a little behind to add some of those features and testing. So Percona server is on version 8, and I think 8.8013 is the latest GA, or 15. 15.5. So Percona server adds some of these features, like some security, but one of that sticks out, which we will talk about in a few minutes, are MyRocks and TokuDB storage engines. And it has some improvements on the original code. Everything that comes with version 8 from Oracle is included, plus some additional features. So something to mention over here in MySQL, there is an Oracle's Enterprise Edition, which is licensed, and it also has a lot of features for enterprise businesses. And it comes with some of these additional modules that you could use in the business, but most with the community support and Percona's development, we have some of these features added into open source version of it. So similar or same solution in the open source and unlicensed, kind of. Okay, so MariaDB has been developing a lot to catch up with the rest of the world, or in some areas they're ahead of the curve, or they are receiving a lot of contributions. As you can see, 10.317 has a lot of features in it, and it has been actively developed and used in the market. It's as an open source database, it's a leading database also. So as I mentioned, from the main MySQL fork, MariaDB and Percona actually brings MyRocks engine. So what is MyRocks engine? What is it for us? It is actually for a key value store. So yes, Oracle came with the JSON support and a key value engine within the newer releases of 5.7 on, but this is more optimized, and it has a smaller footprint, faster for writes. So it could be a good use case for certain applications. As benchmarked, its write efficiency is very high on compared to InnoDB engine. So this is something the creators of MyRocks shares with us every year, and to highlight what the MyRocks versus other engines does. By the way, MyRocks is originated from Facebook, and Facebook actually uses MyRocks in production. They're actually migrating their most of their stack to MyRocks engine for mainly space. Space is a big thing for them, and write speed. Aren't they reading? Yes, they are reading. They also need to read, but reads have other solutions like caching. And this is one of the good graphs that I really like about MyRocks versus InnoDB. InnoDB is very optimized for reads, but when it comes to very high efficient load of writes, we have a need for different engines. So what are the other players in MySQL world? Okay, Oracle, Percona, MariaDB, some engine additions. We also have cloud providers doing their own forks. They do use MySQL, but they sometimes modify, sometimes they adopt it to their cloud platform. And leading brand over here is AWS. And by popularity in MySQL space where I am at, this is the order of cloud providers that I'm seeing on day-to-day basis. So AWS, RDS is very popular, and Aurora is super popular for the last 2 years. Google Cloud also has their Google SQL, and Alibaba is growing very, very fast. And there are other players. A small note over here, most Linux distributions that you download and use or in production comes with MariaDB default. That may change over time, but currently that's what we see. And the list is provided on the link. You can see it. So popularity of MySQL versus other databases. Yes, MySQL is very popular. Oracle is still #1, and there are other players in in the database market like SQL Server, and there's a great use case for Microsoft SQL Server because of its ease of use and application coding on it. Of course, this is the enterprise, and it is easy to research for the statistics on the enterprise databases because they're licensed, and we know who's licensed them and how much it's sold. They reach their targets, it's publicly available. But when it comes to open sources, it is difficult to collect the data. So there's a sample of data. MySQL is still the leading database, with Postgres following it up. There are certain regions like South America, Postgres is very popular. There are some other databases are coming up, and what is used for social media, web scale, you know, the content providers, they all use MySQL because we interact with them a lot, and then we share their problems. They are the actually original contributors for the MySQL when it comes to finding bugs, because they actually face it much more than anybody else. And there are other companies like SaaS providers and AWS, Salesforce. So this is probably a sample, so those numbers may not be accurate. It is very difficult to capture who uses MySQL in their production environment. So what is the most used database in the world? Does anybody know? Anybody? What's that? No? Any guess? Good one. It's not Oracle, it's not SQL Server, it's not DB2 definitely. Well, DB2 was one of the biggest one on AS400 for mainframe databases, and then IBM actually forked UDB DB2, and MySQL is popular on open source databases, but Postgres is following. But it's actually, the answer is correct, it's SQLite, because it's used on every device that we interact on daily basis. It's billions of devices that we know. I mean, if you look at it, just iPhones in the world or Android devices in the world, how many of them are there? There are that many. If you have a router at home, there is a SQLite. If you have a Wi-Fi access point or anything like that, it has a SQLite in it. So this talk doesn't cover SQLite. I'd like to talk about that, but we'll continue on the edge cases on MySQL. So when we interact with MySQL, there's actually interesting statistics comes out every day. And one of them is like creating insane amount of tables in a database. Could we do that? Yes, there's a link over there. You can create a 1 billion table in MySQL database. What happens after that is problems. If you have very large clusters, it becomes very difficult to manage. But is it being managed? It is. With the DevOps support, with automation, with today's cloud platforms, it is possible to fork these databases on demand and then use them in production. So if you have any questions about that, please come and talk to me, and then I can give you some examples on that. Also, the other one is the sharded operations are very popular. For example, Google's YouTube and some other streaming providers actually, or geo-distributed databases use Vitess, and there are other sharding solutions. There's a lot of, in early 2010, 2015 timeframe, there has been a lot of in-house sharding implementations happened. So when it comes to scalability, there is also another topic called proxy, and there is a proxy wars that is going on for the last 10, 15 years to be able to scale in this market. What we see is known proxies where probably in the development world you see a lot on HA proxy and maybe Nginx. But when it comes to databases, we would like to have much more control on database operations. So there are very popular proxies like Proxy SQL, ScaleArc, MaxScale, And we've had used NetScaler in early web days in 2000s, actually. F5s as a hardware, and then they became like a software or VMware editions. I personally managed eBay databases for some time, and we used NetScaler at that time. And there's also another one called MySQL Router, which I will show you some of that. So on the open source market, I listed all of these. ScaleArc is licensed. MaxScale is licensed after version 2. NetScaler is always licensed. And so we want to talk about open source. On the open source side, ProxySQL is the leading proxy. It's a database-aware proxy, and it's not only fire and forget type of proxy like HA proxy. And it has an admin utility in internal database, and there's a lot of features and use cases. So if you want to look or search, I have some presentations in the past that talked about these. Could be use case for you. On the MariaDB side, yes, there is a max scale, and until it went really good until 1.4, and then MariaDB changed courses to business license model. A lot of features added in version 2. It's still being under active development, but if you're using for a business and making money off of it, you have to pay a license. So there's some terms and conditions that applies. But MariaDB has, MaxScale has very good features that some of them are being also actively developed in ProxySQL. ProxySQL is version 2 is released recently, and it's under active development also. And 2.7 comes with a lot of bug fixes, but the features are very rich. I recommend for looking at it. So the proxy vision on two sides from, if we steer off on the open source part, ProxySQL is open source. So basically, it's a layer between the web application and the database. This image actually represents a very basic implementation of it. You could basically download and set it up on your, Vagrant VM machine on your Mac. But if I have like a large clusters of database, how do I use this? There are a couple of methods in ProxySQL implementation that you can cluster and create an HA, or you can have web server bundle that you can actually add it to your web servers. So there's different implementation. On the MySQL side, for the Oracle, there is a MySQL router is under development. It is open source. Community edition is available. You can download and use it. It is similar proxy, but it doesn't have that popularity in the market right now. So the vision over here for Oracle's group replication, the HA solution, to use MySQL router. But as of today, you can still use ProxySQL for that. So what are the HA solutions in the market? On-premise, we have group replication and DB cluster. And we have a Galera-based solution. Galera is a write-set replication method, which is implemented in Percona's XtraDB. And again, that's a same version, same features, but it's a cluster software that's bundled in. And MariaDB also uses Galera implementation. Continued Tungsten, ScaleArc, Vitess, the other replication methods you can make your own using MHA orchestrator, ProxySQL, and MySQL failover. So these are the very common methods to do HA. Why do I need an HA? HA is a business requirement. Most businesses require HA. This is not a disaster recovery. It's for like availability. And there are some solutions, but you have to be careful because some of these solutions are not actually good to use for every use cases of MySQL. So write intensive applications, it's you may have to think about how to design it. So in the cloud also, Aurora is leading product over there. There's a lot of developments in that. Aurora also released a serverless version of it, and serverless is very popular in the market. and you can launch an Aurora instance and have a built-in HA. Aurora's HA solution is disk-based, so it is more hardware than a software implementation. So the Google, Microsoft, and AliCloud also provide these HA solutions. Okay, what are the tools in MySQL ecosystem in 2009? So Percona Toolkit is very popular. It's open source. It comes with online schema change, table sync, and extra backup. So extra backup is the hot backup solution. We call this a physical backup. And MySQL shell that comes since version 5.7. Orchestrator, GitHub originated. GitHub online schema transfer, Ghost is there, and it's been actively used and developed in GitHub, open source. MHA is very popular. Again, MHA was originated from Facebook and widely used, but MHA is losing its popularity because it only managed master-slave pairs to use for promoting a slave to a master. Tungsten replicator, and MySQL comes with a bunch of built-in tools. Cluster control is very popular from several nines. It manages those Galera and Percona XtraDB instances. It has also GUI web-based tool. MySQL Sandbox was originated and written by one of our contributors in community Giuseppe, and is being modified and deployed in a DB deployer. This is a great tool for testing versions and creating clusters on your local machine. Sysbench is very popular database benchmarking tool. It's been actively developed by one of the contributors, and it's open source. You can download and try. We use Sysbench to create a load in our development environments and then test how things work. Also, there are GUI tools. If you're not very, shell active and you want to use Workbench, is actively developed. And I did use Workbench in the past. PHPMyAdmin was very popular. The other part on the Percona's monitoring and management tool to monitor your databases, and Vivid Cortex is another one. We'll talk about that. So what are the trending topics right now? So everyone is trying to do Kubernetes, and we have a workshop this afternoon. And we also hear a lot of news about group replication. Group replication is very, very popular in the HA world. So for those who tried and did not adapt to Galera's right-set replication clusters may actually try this one. Galera 4.0 came out, which is also, again, HA solution. MySQL 8 is super popular. It's been actively developed. Vitess has become very popular in 2017, 2018. Continues to be growing with Planet SQL and we see a lot of POCs and production implementations going on very large web scale databases. So we have monitoring tools, proxy SQL, and orchestrator is actively developed also. So these are your highlights. If you actually haven't seen or tested these, you can download and see and play with it. So from the trending topics, the last 2 years, we see a lot of development application going on Kubernetes. And what happens in the database world? So we have right now very popular operators for Kubernetes. And how do I do that with databases? We actually use XtraDB cluster for it. And so we're gonna have a talk about this, not getting into full details, but basically you can operate your databases under Kubernetes. So it comes with automation, it comes with failover, backups, some security features, and if you actually dedicate it to do your applications in Kubernetes, you can definitely do databases. So Oracle also has an operator. I haven't tested that, but for the Percona's operator, I did have some blog posts, and if you want to take a look at it, there's you can try it on your local machine. So we talked about a little bit on Vitess, but I want to get into some of the highlights. Vitess actually comes with all of those open source tools and features that was added on top of MySQL as a package. It's an open source tool. It's actually originated from YouTube. Now it's been implemented in Slack type of large deployments. And it does come with proxy, so you don't need to actually implement a proxy. It comes with failover. It comes with sharding. Actually, the original idea is the sharding of databases. And it also, of course, it also comes with some of the restrictions. Okay. So with the group replication, there is it's a plugin, and group replication has a Paxos-based algorithm, and it comes with an InnoDB engine. So you can basically migrate your database into group replication without having to do that. Galera is coming with like full features. It was on 3.x version with the extra DB. Now it's on 4. So it is actually very popular, been released earlier this year. On the monitoring side, the open source Percona's PMM, it is very popular. On the other side, Vivid Cortex actually has a very extensive implementation. It's not open source, but I must mention over here, it's a very strong monitoring and tool that is used in very large places that you see some of these logos and more. And Vivid Cortex has a network analyzer. Actually, Vivid Cortex comes between your application and a database, so it actually sits in between to capture all that information. And thank you for listening. I also have a talk in Percona Live Amsterdam, and if you use that code, you can get a discount if you're willing to travel to Amsterdam. And thank you very much.
Thank you for your talk. Do we have any question? We have just a pair of minutes to ask something.
Okay.
If you,
Anybody?
Anybody? Oh, I see. Just a moment.
Okay.
Your question, please.
Hello, I have a question. Which security feature we can use for implement security in SQL, MySQL?
On the security features, actually, one of the biggest security feature that I saw in version 8 is the roles. So instead of giving grants to each user from the Oracle world, from the RDBMS world, we had roles. So the minimum is the best for security, right? So for most of the users, they only need to read. So you can create a role that is for read and then give it to the set of users, and they will use that for access. There's other features, but most importantly, there's a lot of encryption and limitations on the MySQL security features. So you may want to look in what areas are restricted for that implementation, and give the minimum amount of that. MySQL up until 5.7 didn't have a whole lot of restrictions on users, and people actually used grants, all grant super users, and we still find today there are things like that. What we do is we check, we have a certain checks, we check for passwordless users, we check for wildcard users, we check for users, system created users, so we remove those. And you could on the version 8 there's a log encryption and new super user privileges, which actually restricts the access.
Thank you. By the way, Alkin, it's not as easy. We have at least one more question.
Okay.
Hello. You mentioned that witness have some restrictions and some limitations. Could you please explain what it means? For example, now we're looking to migrate into Vitess.
Okay. So Vitess has some restrictions on certain implementations. If you're using all the features in MySQL, like the foreign keys and auto increments and things like that, it doesn't directly allow for you to migrate over. So you may have to change your application to adapt into those restrictions. And then we can go over some of those details later on, okay?
I've seen one more hand here.
Do we have any time? Okay,
Here.
good.
The last question, please.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for your talk. My question is about MySQL proxies. What kind of proxy you recommend, or maybe Percona recommends to use in heavy write scenarios?
Heavy write scenarios.
Yes.
So proxy is actually a messenger in between. On the heavy write applications, you're still looking at your database side. So database, hardware, all of that is implemented. So you need to optimize your backend first. From the proxy side, proxy SQL has been very popular in the market, and it's been tested in very heavy write applications. So we did not actually have a problem with that as long as you fine-tune proxy SQL properly and give proper resources to it. So
Thank you.
the heavier the write load, the memory and the CPU requirement for proxy layer will increase. That's all.
Thank you, Alkin.